All right. So, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Okay. So last time where we were still doing the review of the previous year where we did the Seerah, and we stopped at the foster care of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Halima Sa'diya. That was the name. Then when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was with Halima Sa'diya after he was born, his mother Amina, it was the practice of the Arab people to send their children to foster care so they can become stronger. The language of the people in the Bedouin tribes outside of Mecca, their language was much clearer. It was very eloquent, and so the kids, the babies, they can learn to develop that language. And for many other reasons, they used to send their children to foster care. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also the last one in Mecca to be selected because he was an orphan sent to force foster care to Halima Sa'diya. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mother was still alive at that time. And he lived with Halima Sa'diya for 4 years. And we know that while he was with Halima Sa'diya, a lot of good blessings and good luck and everything nice was happening to the family of Halima Sa'diya and her children and her husband. And they did not want to let go of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The typical period for foster care was like 2 years or 4 years. So after 4 years, Amina came and she wanted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam back, and then Halima Sa'diya made a lot of excuses and arguments that no, we can't send him back, and because they didn't want to let go of all of the blessings. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stayed with Halima Sa'diya for 2 more years. And then when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was about 5 years old, a very miraculous event happened where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was 5 years old and he was playing with the children of Halima Sa'diya. She had her own children. And then suddenly, someone came and threw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam down. He was 5 years old, grabbed him, cut open his chest, essentially tore open the chest, and washed the chest with water, and took out a black spot from the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, washed the heart, and then put the chest back together. And all of these details were not seen by the children, and the children got really, really scared, and they thought that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was being murdered, but it was actually Jibreel alayhi salam who actually came and cleansed the chest of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The signs of that chest opening were still visible when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was older, and the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they could see like a line through his chest. So that was the event. And then I don't have the notes here in front of me, but this is all, we don't have a lot of stories of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was born until he got the prophethood, because obviously he would be recording some of these details. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we all know, he was known to be extremely, extremely nice and kind and honest and trustworthy. And his name was Sadiq and Amin, the truthful. He always tells the truth. He always is trustworthy. He was in complete high regard of everyone. He got married to Khadija radiallahu anha when he was 25 years old. And Khadija was his first wife. She was a very, very wealthy lady. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to herd sheep to earn money. He wasn't himself very wealthy, but Khadija radiallahu anha was very wealthy. One time, Khadija radiallahu anha, she was a businesswoman. She had all this wealth, and she was looking for trustworthy people to actually help her with her business. So she, with the recommendations of some other people, picked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do business for her. And you know the Rahlat al-Shita'i was-Sayf, the business, the trade route of Mecca, but you know, where from Mecca you go up to the Syria area and you go down to Yemen and you sell and buy things. So in that journey, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went on these journeys for Khadija radiallahu anha, and brought back a lot of money for her, and she was really, really impressed, and she started to fall in love with him, and they got married. Okay, so that is one thing that happened. This is before prophethood, so his marriage to Khadija radiallahu anha. Also, Rasulullah, when he was younger, around 14, 15, he used to participate in battles. He wasn't in the front of the lines, but he used to like collect arrows, and there were feuds happening between the tribal Arabs all the time. And he used to fight, he participated in the battles. He also participated in some of the reconciliatory type of events that happened where there were disagreements between tribes, and he participated in it to create agreement. There was one famous incident called Hilf al-Fudul. I don't want to get into the detail, but I'm going to just give you the name. Hilf al-Fudul was another event. And then another famous event about building the Kaaba. You know about that event. I think you all would know about that event, but Kaaba was damaged one time in floods, and Kaaba was completely broken. So the Quraysh decided, and they all revered the Kaaba. Yeah, we all understand that Quraysh has high regard for the Kaaba. It was very, very important. It was very, very holy for them. So when a flood came and destroyed the Kaaba, and by the way, the Kaaba does not look like the way it is now. It used to be much lower building, okay? And it was rectangular. You know, the Kaaba is a square, right? Let me draw this out for you. So you all know this. I know you know this, but I just want to remind you. So Kaaba right now is a square. And then you know that there's like this Hatim area, which is curved over here like that. So Kaaba actually was rectangular and is rectangular. This is inside of the Kaaba. So when you go to Mecca and you go inside this Hatim area, this is actually also part of the Kaaba. When you're inside here and you're praying inside here, you are actually praying inside the Kaaba. Okay, technically speaking, when you're inside here, you don't have to face this way to pray. You can pray anywhere, in any direction. You can pray here, you can pray here, because you're inside the Kaaba. Once you're inside the Kaaba, which direction will you pray? You can pray anywhere, correct? Anyway, so typically people just, because it just makes sense physically, because this area is separated, people always face this direction when they're inside the Hatim. Those of you who've been there, you can see that. Okay. Anyways, so the Kaaba got destroyed, and they rebuilt the Kaaba. They bought some, there happened to be a ship shipping marble and stones and all this wonderful stuff to Yemen. There was a ship that was coming from the Christendom kingdom in Rome, and they were delivering some supplies to build a church in Yemen, but that ship crashed in Jeddah. And if you look at the Arabian Peninsula, right? And this is the Red Sea in here, and this is the Red Sea right here. And Rome, I didn't mean to erase it. Okay, Jeddah is right here on the coast. That was the city that I grew up in. Mecca is right here. I can't draw. Mecca is right here. This is the Red Sea. Okay, so the ship was coming on its way to Yemen, which is down here. And then it crashed, the ship wrecked. So the Quraysh found out, they went over there to check it out, and they're like, this is all this wonderful stuff. And they brought it back to Mecca to use all those supplies to actually rebuild the Kaaba. And we all know the story when there was always a stone, the Hijr al-Aswad, in the Kaaba. What that stone is, nobody really understands it, but it came from Jannah. So it was always considered to be a very sacred stone. and a fight broke out between all the tribes and who was going to actually put this final stone after the Kaaba was built. And by the way, one more tip for you. The reason Kaaba is a square now and not a rectangle is because after it got destroyed, they didn't have enough supplies to build it back as a rectangle. So they ended up building it as a square. Okay? Is that clear to everybody? It's very important that you know this. So the reason they built it as a square is because they didn't have enough supplies to actually build it back as a rectangle. Anyway, so going back to the incident of the building of the Kaaba, so there was a time to put the stone, and a fight broke out between all of the tribes of the Quraysh. There were multiple tribes in the Quraysh, and who will put the stone? So Rasulullah essentially, they all said that whoever is going to walk in from this direction is going to be the one who will actually put the stone in, and they made an agreement. And when Rasulullah walked in, they were extremely happy. It's like, finally, we have one person who we trust, and he's always truthful, and he's always the best of the people. He's the one who is going to help us. So basically, Rasulullah came up with the idea that they're gonna be a sheet of there's going to be a sheet where the stone is going to be put in the middle, and each corner of the sheet is going to be held by the tribal leaders, so that everybody feels like they put the stone in the Kaaba. Anyway, so that one event happened in the lifetime of the Prophet before the Nabuwah. So Rasulullah was always so moving on from that event. Any questions, by the way, before we move on from the event?
No.
Okay, you all know that, all know that story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on from that event, of course, we talked about the marriage of Rasulullah to Khadija, radiallahu anha. But one thing I will tell you about there were a handful of people in Mecca, okay, who were not idol worshippers. There were a handful of people. Waraqa ibn Nawfal, Khadija radiallahu anha's cousin Waraqa was one of those people. There were other people also, even in Yemen and some of the other areas. They were not all idol worshippers. There were a handful of people. They were known as, they called themselves, or we ascribe that name to them, I can't remember, but they called themselves Hanif. Okay, they called themselves Hanif. And this is a term that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses for actually Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hanif. What does Hanif mean? The one who is sincere in worship to one God. So there were people who were Ahnaf. They were Hanif. Okay, Ahnaf is a plural of Hanif. So there were people who were Ahnaf. They believed in the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. If you remember from our previous summary, the genealogy of the Arab tribes comes from Ibrahim alayhi salam, and Ibrahim alayhi salam had a message. So obviously that message got lost eventually, but some people still followed the way of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Okay, or they tried to follow the ways of Ibrahim alayhi salam. These people were very, very highly educated. They were educated in the Bible. They were educated in the Torah. So some of those people were still around. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself did not worship idols. He did not commit any sins. That he was known to be a person who would not be part of the riffraff or the illicit behavior or the bad behavior or any of the bad practices that the mushrikeen of Makkah were part of. He was known to be a person disconnected from all of this. Okay, never idol worship, didn't drink wine, didn't commit major sins, didn't tell a lie. He was kind to people. He was always nice to people, etc., etc. You understand? So that was the nature of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam before his prophethood. Okay. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right before he got the prophethood, the first revelation came to him right before he started to get dreams, and he used to spend a lot of time in Hira, in a cave next to on a mountain next to Mecca. He used to walk up in this treacherous terrain, go up to the cave, spend days over there. And Khadija radiallahu anha used to pack, rations for him. And basically she tells us this later on through some hadith. Basically, he used to spend days up in Hira, come back, get more rations, go back. So this is like 6 months before he got the revelation. And then one night, as you know, the famous incident of revelation when Surah Alaq came down, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. So one night Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the cave, and this Jibreel alayhi salam came down and squeezed him 3 times. You all know the story. And he asked him, Iqra. He told him, Iqra, read, recite, right? Iqra has 2 meanings, read or recite. Okay? Iqra, in the name of your Lord. Iqra, bismi rabbika alladhi, the one who created you. And he's like, I can't read. He responded, Ma ana biqari, I cannot read. And then Jibreel alayhi salam squeezed him 2 more times and said, Iqra, Iqra. Every time he would say, I cannot read. And anyway, after that event, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came back to Khadija radiallahu anha, and he was extremely scared. He was so scared about what just had happened because he himself was a human being. We have to understand always Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a human being just like you and me, okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala essentially enabled him with the strength of prophethood, so that he could become even more patient and help him see things that he was not able to see, and gave him knowledge that we don't have, right? So there is a level of elevation of prophethood that happens after the prophethood arrives, but before that you're just a human being. We have to understand Rasulullah was just a human being. That's why we're supposed to follow him as a role model. If he was not approachable, if his character and his behavior was not approachable, was not something that was realistic, how can we be expected to follow a role model? A role model is somebody who you aspire to become, and it becomes your goal. So we always have to think Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was just a human being, just like you and I. He ate food. He went to the bathroom, he had feelings, he had desires, he got angry, he got happy, right? He went through pain and suffering, and not everything was hunky-dory for him, okay? So we all understand that. So going back to that the first revelation, Rasulullah was eventually very, very scared. And I'll pause there for a second and I'll go back. One thing I forgot to talk about is before the revelation, so Rasulullah when he came back from foster care, his mother passed away, okay, shortly after. So when his mother passed away when he was 6 years old. And then Abdul Muttalib, his grandfather, Rasulullah's grandfather, used to take care of him. But then his grandfather passed away when he was 8 years old. So then Abu Talib, his uncle, one of his uncles, Abu Talib, whose son is Ali, who's the cousin of Rasulullah, Abu Talib started to take care of him at that time, okay? Abu Talib was not a very rich man, so he didn't have a lot of money, but he was still supporting of Rasulullah. So by the time Rasulullah reached the age of 40, Abu Talib was already a pretty old man too. His uncle was old too, okay? So when Rasulullah married Khadija, and Khadija was wealthy and Rasulullah was wealthy, then Ali radiallahu anhu, who was the cousin of Rasulullah from Abu Talib, the son of Abu Talib, Ali used to live in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because Abu Talib didn't have a lot of money. So Ali radiallahu anhu used to live in Ali radiallahu anhu used to live with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, that was one person that lived in addition to Khadija and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also, there was an adopted son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His name was Zayd. Okay, Zayd ibn Haritha. There was a boy that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had adopted. He was sold somewhere, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam adopted him as a son. He loved him so much that he called him a son. Later on, the laws came down for adoption, where adopted children are not considered your children. You're supposed to consider them your brothers and sisters. But before this law came down, he was known as Zayd ibn Muhammad, the son of Muhammad. Okay, so that's how much he loved him. So he used to also live with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there was another maid servant as well that used to live with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so you understand now. The revelation happened, and then the Iqra came down, and then there was another event that happened where the second revelation came down after a period. So there was a period of about a few months or a week. I don't think there's clarity on that, but a few weeks or months went by when no revelation came, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam got really worried. It's like, what just happened? And then suddenly he was still going to Hira during that time, and another time when he went to Hira, Jibreel alayhi salam manifested himself above the sky. And he called on to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah again got pretty scared. And then the second surah came down, most commonly referred to as Ya ayyuhal muddathir. Surah Muddathir came down. Qum fa'andir wa rabbaka fakabbir wa thiyabaka fatahhir wa rujza fahjur. So that surah came down. You understand thus far what had happened? So second revelation came down. And then it contained these 6 commandments. Of course, the surah is much longer than that, but basically the ayah goes, Ya ayyuhal mudaththir, oh, the one who is wrapped up. Again, Rasulullah after that event got extremely scared because he saw such a magnificent, scary image of Jibreel alayhi salam with his wings, all 600-700 of them, spread across from horizon to horizon, and he got extremely scared, and he rushed again to Khadija radiallahu anha, and then the surah came down, Ya, oh, the one who is wrapped up, Ya ayyuhal mudaththir, qum fa'andir, stand up and warn people, وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, and then glorify your Lord, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and then cleanse your garments, وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ, and abandon idol worship, وَلَا تَمْنُنْ تَسْتَكْثِرْ, and do not do good things expecting a reward back from people. Right? You should never have that expectation that when you do good things, you do it for the sake of Allah. You don't accept rewards. وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ, and be patient for the sake of your Lord, because a lot of hard things are going to happen to you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the task ahead. That what is his job? His job is to warn, and his job is to clean himself and abandon idolatry, do good deeds without expecting any favors, and continue to show patience and forbearance. You guys got it? Awesome.
Yes.
So that was the message of Rasulullah. After that, the revelation came down frequently. By the way, I do want to stop here, pause, and show you a hadith in Sahih Bukhari. And we can read that hadith, and we can stop right there, and we can, next time, inshallah, we can talk about the proclamation. So Sahih Al-Bukhari, the book of Hadith, the famous book of Hadith, one of the, if not the most authentic, according to Muslims, the most authentic book of the sayings of the Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Sahih Al-Bukhari after the Quran. It is a book that has about 96 chapters, 97 chapters. The numbering may change. And the first book is called Kitab Bad'ul Wahi, the Kitab of the beginning of revelation. Okay, the beginning of the revelation. And this Kitab, this Sahih Bukhari talk starts with the hadith that we already did in the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi that we had started last week. Innamal a'malu binniyat, all actions are based on intentions. It starts with that, but the next hadith, next few hadith, it's a long one, but this talks about the event of Rasulullah's first revelation. Okay, so let's read this together. I'm going to slowly try to read this for you guys. So Aisha, this is the wife of Rasulullah, she is narrating to us. Clearly, it's obvious that Rasulullah told her this story. Okay, so Aisha is narrating to us that the commencement, the beginning of the divine inspiration, the wahi to Allah's messenger, was in the form of good dreams, which came true like bright daylight. So Rasulullah, remember I told you that right before the revelation, 6 months before, he started to get dreams, and things that he saw in his dreams started to come true. And then the love for seclusion was bestowed on him. So Rasulullah started to feel like he wanted to be alone and secluded, and that's why he used to go to Hira. He used to go in seclusion in cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah alone continuously for many days before his desire to see his family. He used to take with him the journey for the journey, food for him to stay, and then come back to his wife Khadija to then take additional food, until suddenly the truth descended upon him and he was in the cave of Hira. The angel came down to him and asked him to read. The Prophet replied, I don't know how to read. The Prophet added, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it anymore. He then released me again and asked me to read. Iqra. And I replied, Ma ana biqari, I don't know how to read. Therefore, he caught me again and pressed me a second time till I could not bear it any longer. He then released me and again asked me to read. But again, I replied, I don't know how to read. Thereupon, he caught me for the third time and pressed me and then released me and said, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, read in the name of your Lord who has created. Khalaq al-insana min alaq, created man from a clot. Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram, and read, and your Lord is most generous. Then Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned with the inspiration, with the wahi, and with his heart beating severely. Then he went to Khadija bint Khuwaylid, Khadija, the wife of Rasulullah, and said, cover me, zammiluni, zammiluni. They covered him till his fear was over. And after that, he told her everything that had happened and said, I fear that something may happen to me. He got really scared. He's like, I feel like something is going to happen to me. Like I'm going to be given this responsibility, or I don't know if what I'm seeing is like, am I going crazy? What just happened? And then Khadija radiallahu anh reassured him. Okay, so this is the beautiful part that I wanted to highlight, and that's why we're reading the hadith. And Khadija radiallahu anh said such beautiful things to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was really scared after this event. She said, never, by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. Okay, so the mushrikeen at that time, they used to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Khadija radiallahu anh was part of a family of the Hanif people that we talked about. Okay, she came from that family. She said, by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your kith and kin, help poor and the destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving calamity afflicted ones, and you help the people that are afflicted with calamity. Okay. Then Khadija accompanied him to her cousin Waraqa bin Nawfal, who was a Hanif, who during the pre-Islamic period became a Christian and used to write the writings of the Hebrew letters. He knew how to write Hebrew, read and write Hebrew. He used to write from the Gospel, from Injil in Hebrew, as much as Allah wished him to write. He was an old man and had lost his eyesight by that time. Khadija said to Waraqa, so Khadija radiallahu anha, after this event, she took him to Waraqa because he's like, okay, maybe Waraqa knows, because, you know, an angel came down. She didn't know it was an angel. This event happened. Let me take Rasulullah to Waraqa to see what he has to say. So Khadija took Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Waraqa, and then listen to the story of your nephew, oh my cousin. Yeah, listen to the story of your nephew, or my cousin. Waraqa asked, oh my nephew, what have you seen? Allah's messenger described what he had seen. Waraqa said, oh, this is the same one, this angel that came down. This is the same one who keeps the secrets. Basically, he's the one who brings down the revelations, whom Allah had sent to Moses. I wish. So he immediately believed in the story of Rasulullah. So Waraqa, he you can say, was one of the first person in Islam, the first one who believed Rasulullah, who was whom? Did you catch that?
Christian.
Khadija radiallahu anha, right? And then from here, from this story, you will know that Waraqa also believed in Rasulullah. He immediately believed in him. It's like, this is what had happened. He said, when this is the same angel that came down to Moses. I wish if I were young, I could live up to see the time when your people will kick you out. He said, I know that your people will turn you out. And Rasulullah was completely surprised to hear this. And he asked him, will they drive me out? Waraqa replied, yes. Any man who came with a message similar to what you have brought was treated with hostility. And if I were to remain alive, Waraqa said, and if I could live longer, he was already a very old, blind man at that time. He said, if I were to remain alive, I will support you. And after a few days after that event, Waraqa had died. Okay, so I just wanted to read you from the actual hadith that's in Sahih Al-Bukhari. It's the third hadith in Sahih Bukhari. Okay, so for your reference, if you're ever interested in the details of the story, you can read this long, detailed hadith, and this will tell you what that story is. Okay, any questions? Then I'll give you a 5-minute break.
During this time, were the Christians in Arabia, were they Catholics, or were they just like
Christianity had a lot of denominations, okay? They had a lot of denominations at that time, so different denominations of Christians were there, but there were hardly any Christians in Mecca. Most of the Christians were in the surrounding areas and in Medina, okay? So not a lot of Christianity there, but just a handful of Hanif people. Okay, like 5 or 7 of them in Mecca. Okay, out of the, let's say if the Mecca had a population of 1,000, 2,000 people, maybe 3,000 people max, then about 4, 5, 6 of them were Hanif people. Any other questions? Okay, I'll give you a listening break for about 5 minutes. So let's start at 12:10, inshallah, okay? All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everybody back? All right, there was one question that I missed that somebody put in the chat. Would the parents who foster care take care of their own children, or would they also send their child to a different foster care? I think they all sent their children, and not everybody did that. Only noblemen from the from the Quraysh would send their children to foster care. Not everybody necessarily did that, as far as we understand, as far as I understand. Okay, so they did not take care of the own children initially. They sent them all to foster care. Only the noblemen from the Quraysh.